Welcome back to Talk of the Town. I'm Steve Noxon, and joining me on the phone now is State Senator Rob Sampson. Rob, I was going to intro you with some Red Hot Chili Peppers, but I just couldn't bring myself around to doing it.
I am a huge Jimi Hendrix fan too, Steve, so no worries. I was enjoying that. I was like, no, let it go.
Well, to be fair, that's actually Stevie Ray Vaughan, but...
you're right. Oh, my God, I should have realized that.
Very
right.
very similar styles, though.
Yeah.
But I just remember the last time we spoke, and you had to kind of, chastise me for talking about how much I disliked the Peppers. So,
Do it at your own risk. They're quite popular. Knocking them is dangerous.
I am firm in my conviction that the Red Hot Chili Peppers are not a great band. So we're going to talk about a couple of issues with Senator Sampson here, and the first one is you held a meeting, a forum over in Southington a day or two ago. And to talk about the teaching of critical race theory in our schools. And just so we can be clear on this, I'd like you to give your definition of what you think critical race theory is.
Well, critical race theory, it depends on who you ask, actually. I think that the critics of critical race theory would say that it is the ideology that promotes the idea that the United States is a racist country. It was founded on the principle of racism. Many of the ideas found in the 1619 Project that was published in the New York Times last year, and promotes the idea that because of our racist past, the only solution to past discrimination is present discrimination, and the only solution to present discrimination is future discrimination. This is almost a direct quote from Ibram Kendi, who's one of the founders and fathers of critical race theory. And there's a lot of, a word salad of terms that have come out of it. You know, you've heard people mention the term systemic racism, or white privilege, or white fragility. These are all aspects of the teachings of critical race theory. And my concern has never been so much that they're teaching the actual theory in the classroom, but what they're doing is they're promoting this ideology. And I think it's just a matter of whether or not this is a part of the authorized curriculum, which is definitely happening in some places, and you can see elements of it in our national platform on education, the State Education Resource Council, their documents that they put out also. But my issue really is that what you have is teachers who have this ideology, and it's very few. I mean, I don't want to knock teachers at all. In fact, I'm doing this in large part to protect teachers. But the teachers that are promoting this are promoting what I think is a sick ideology, and I don't want it in a classroom, and I don't believe children should be taught these things. I think their political ideology and their view of the world should come from their family and their parents, and not from their schoolroom. And I really want to help teachers by preventing this from becoming commonplace, where they end up having to be responsible for teaching an ideology that they do not agree with.
I'm just amazed by the reaction to the promoters of this critical race theory when they get criticized. First of all, it's not being taught in the schools, but then you turn around and the National Federation of Teachers has put together a $5 million legal defense fund for anyone who gets in trouble for teaching it in schools. Well, that right there is a tacit admission that it's happening. The fact that they don't want parents to know what their kids are being taught by trying to simply, deny that it's going on and hide this effort, tells me more than I need to know about what is happening inside the schools. The schools, even the school boards, are running into problems with parents standing up and demanding that this ideology not be taught in their schools. And I mean, they're calling the cops on the parents. Who now aren't the parents the one that are first of all elect the school board, and isn't the school board supposed to be responsive to what the parents wish?
Right. As much as I am frustrated about critical race theory and the fact that we have to face this issue in our society, one thing that gives me great hope is witnessing the rebirth of our system of government. The idea that, parents are actually interacting with their local boards of education and forcing change and demanding accountability. And I have been working very hard to encourage that in towns all across Connecticut, some in my district and even outside my district, because I think it's so important for parents to regain control. That's our system, Steve. People have lost their way in this country. And COVID and the government's reaction to it has probably been the largest leap in the opposite direction from our founding principle of a representative government where the individual person, and I'm going to say that word many, many times every time I speak, because we're losing the value of an individual's rights and decision-making power and their ability to cast their vote and make their opinion known in favor of a collective and in favor of the centralized government. We need to get back to protecting the individual, making sure that individuals know that their Board of Ed representatives work for them and are supposed to be producing policy based on their wishes. And that's how our system of government works. And people think the president's the most powerful person in the country, but no, it's you and me are the most powerful people in the country, and the president is the least powerful. He's the one who's responsible to all 300-plus million residents of the United States.
Now, you told me something rather surprising offline. We were talking about how these school districts and these teachers are saying, no, it's not being taught in the schools. And even, in fact, back in June, the State Education Resource Center said that this was it's just a theory and it's not a curriculum being taught to students. Yet, as you pointed out, you had some teachers in one of the school systems, I think it was in Southington, right?
Right. Well, there is a online petition, and I believe it has something to do with the Howard Zinn Foundation, which you may be familiar with Howard Zinn. Yeah. He's a guy who is notorious for drafting an alternate version of history for the purpose of promoting Marxist policies. Well, that foundation or somebody who works there or wrote up this petition where you could sign as an educator in America that you will continue to teach the principles of critical race theory, even if it becomes illegal in your state or in the country. And there were 3 educators from the town of Southington that signed that document. In fact, one of them was protesting outside my rally, even though she had been invited to actually participate in the presentation that I put on. And the presentation was really, I had an expert, a PhD, come down from an organization called No Left Turn in Education. And, of course, he's definitely biased. And I'm the first one to admit that. I'm against CRT, and I want to promote the idea of ending this ideology and promotion in the school systems. But I did offer publicly and well in advance equal time to anyone who wanted to come in the room and promote the idea of CRT and why it should be taught. And I had no takers. And this person, who was widely critical of me even before the event and is again critical of me afterwards, they vanished during the whole period where they would have actually had an open forum and the ability to change hearts and minds. And that tells you all you need to know about them. They do not believe in what they are promoting out there. This is a political tool. It's really all about politics. It's all about promoting a Marxist left-wing ideology that's very, very divisive and dangerous to our country, and using it as a hammer against people who disagree, because that's the automatic response, is that if you disagree with CRT, you are somehow racist, which is the most absurd thing, Steve, because anyone who takes a look at CRT understands that it is, in fact, racism on its face.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've read some stories about teachers, standing kids up in a line and making all the white students apologize for being white. They are ranking their students' privileges by the color of their skin and their gender, and it's like, what are we teaching our kids? This is not how you build a united country. This is not how you bring people together, by teaching this kind of divisiveness.
You're absolutely right. And that tells you all you need to know. That's what they want. They want the exact opposite. They want divisiveness. They want to divide the country. It's a lot easier to categorize people by race or gender or things like that and put them into groups and manipulate them with political policy. And we have seen it year after year in the legislature. And it's gotten to an unbelievable epic level at this point, where nearly every bill that goes through the Connecticut General Assembly has some element of this ideology attached to it. every bill has got the word equity or social justice or something like that attached to it, because that's what is going on here, is they are trying to remake our country into a Marxist nation where a select few people are going to decide what behavior is appropriate. And they make the determination of what racism is. They can be as racist as they want, but they're the deciders. So anyone who disagrees with them is automatically racist. And that's what I'm witnessing. I'm being called a racist, even though I have publicly stated and lived my whole life. Coincidentally, I am a Republican because of my love of Abraham Lincoln. I mean, when I was a young person, just learning about American history, I became fascinated with Lincoln and the Civil War, and it's one of the driving forces that led me to be in politics. And the idea that you would call me a racist is just absurd. The belief system I have is the one that a lot of traditional Americans were taught, which is that we judge people based on their character and merit and not the color of their skin. And that's the world I want to live in. That is what I'm going to insist on in my life and the people around me. And I don't care if I'm the last person who believes that. I'm still going to do it.
It's pretty amazing how far we've gotten away from that concept, and supposedly this is called progress. Now, you sponsored an amendment that would have prohibited the curriculums in grades K through 12 to, as you say, as is quoted, making any individual feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress on account of the individual's race or sex. To me, that doesn't sound all that controversial. I don't see how anybody could object to that.
Right. Yeah, Steve, I wish I had the amendment in front of me, because what people need to understand is I did not get up on the Senate floor and attempt to ban critical race theory. I didn't attempt to ban the teaching of history. You will hear claims about these things, but it's not even true. What I did is I offered an amendment that says that teachers will not be allowed to make any students feel anguish over their race, or suggest that somehow because of people from historical events like slavery, etc., that one group of people or one race of people is superior to another, and so on. All things that if you read through them would say, yeah, this makes perfect sense. Why would we ever put these attributes on young, impressionable children? And just the examples you had mentioned a few minutes ago, we are not talking even about high school kids. We're talking about
elementary
second
school
graders
and
things. I mean, it's unbelievable. What they're doing is they're trying to indoctrinate young, impressionable minds with this notion that race determines everything. And we have policies happening on the state legislative level. Do you know that they passed a bill this past year that says that by, I think it's 2026, might be 2028, I'm trying to remember now, but it says that every state board, agency, and commission is going to have a race and gender makeup that reflects the census population. And I asked them, I'm saying, like, doesn't somebody's qualifications matter? Doesn't their life experience or, their ability to do the job have anything to do? We're just going to say, oh, we're missing a white female or we're missing a black male, and we just have to grab one and plug them into the spot, regardless of who we have for applicants and who's qualified. I don't want to live in that world.
What's really fascinating about this to me is the fact that if you reverse the roles here, if you were pushing a white sort of ideology and a white superiority ideology into the schools, like they're pushing this critical race theory into the schools, there would be outrage. And basically, it's just the flip side of that same concept. And yet it's wholeheartedly accepted. You got people out there defending it as though this is what we need to be teaching our kids. And at the same time, I'm going to tell you this. I was talking with somebody yesterday. We had a long conversation about how the schools are failing our kids. And I asked this one kid who's high school graduate that has some college. I said, can you tell me what 15% of 130 is? And he was stumped, absolutely stumped. And I thought to myself, what are we teaching these kids? These kids, I don't really need to know how to do that because I have a calculator. And I thought, well, at least you know how to use a calculator to get to the right answer. And then I remember a couple of years ago, I was talking with a young lady in front of her mom, and I asked her the same question, and she couldn't answer it. And I said, okay, so what's 10% of 100? And she couldn't answer it. And I said, well, what's 10% of $1? And she couldn't answer it. No concept whatsoever about just these basic kind of mathematical concepts. But instead of teaching that and those kinds of real life skills that people will use in their lives, we're teaching this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Steve. I mean, we could talk for quite a while about the problems that are going on in public education across the country, and obviously some school systems are better. I feel like the teachers in my district do a phenomenal job, and that we don't have those kind of problems in our backyard. But it is true. It is happening in places all across this country and in Connecticut as well. And there are a lot of reasons for it. And the number one reason, as you said, is that there is so much more going on in the daily life of a school and a school teacher and their students, rather than learning what parents would want them to learn, which is, how to speak the language properly, how to write, to have a good vocabulary, how to understand how to do math, social studies, skills and valuable information that will help them in the world. Instead, we're replacing it with this, emotion-based political ideology, which does not have a place in a classroom whatsoever. And I'm going to do everything I can to get it out there. And I'm also going to do my best to encourage parents to get involved. We had a speaker at my forum, this lovely woman. Her name is Pat Todd. She is from what's the town this Guilford. I just had a momentary lapse there. She's from Guilford, Connecticut, and if you've been following this issue, they had a huge dust-up over there about this, and they replaced quite a few members of their Republican Board of Education slate in favor of people who have stood strong and say that they are going to oppose this if it comes out. And I that's incredibly encouraging. But the thing about Pat Todd is that she is an elderly woman. I don't want to paint her in a negative way at all, but she is just a unbelievable inspiration, because you take this very petite and quiet elderly woman, and you understand that this woman more or less single-handedly fired up this whole community and had the impact to make this change. She led the fight for that to happen. And the reason why she's an inspiration is because if she can do that, that proves that anyone can get involved on a local level and force change to happen.
Well, we saw it down in New Canaan recently, where a bunch of Republican incumbents who were just kind of going along to get along were actually ousted from the the school board or the town council or something by a bunch of young Republicans who were going to be a little bit more firm in their opposition to some of the things that they're trying to implement there. Yes,
yeah, that's the school board in New Canaan. They have the same exact circumstances, and they have a superintendent. I don't mind who is very much in favor of these types of things and is promoting false information on COVID on a daily basis and many other things. And we've got to get these people to be held accountable by their local boards of education, and those local boards accountable by the people in the district. And we'll be back to an America that we recognize.
I'm so disheartened, too, when I see some of the people on like some of these news channels, these 24-hour news channels talking about this and saying that, well, slavery is not being taught in our schools and never has been. And the history of this country has only been taught from one point of view. And, telling about, nobody knows what happened in the Civil War. Nobody is being taught any of this stuff in school. And I sit back and I think to myself, I've learned all about that stuff. I understand the concept behind things like the 3/5 compromise, which so many people do not even understand why that was put into place. I understand why we have an electoral college and how it led to the abolition of slavery. See, I'm not a real hardcore student of history. In fact, I flunked a semester of history in high school, but I understand these concepts and how this country was developed. I was taught that stuff in school. And to sit there and say it's not being taught and our kids don't know it, well, first of all, that's a failure of our system again if it's not being taught, because it's critical that it is taught, but it needs to be taught truthfully.
You're absolutely correct. And I made this point earlier. I mean, the people that promote CRT, they do not want accurate history taught. In fact, they don't want the facts of history taught. They want their political ideology taught. That is it. And you and I understand history and the fact that there is no one set of principles or ideology that has driven history in the world or in the United States. There are people on all sides of issues, as there are today throughout history. But to say simply that the United States is a racist country founded on the principle of racism and slavery is just provably false. And it does a tremendous injustice to the people that have lived and sacrificed through America's history in the fight against slavery. You know, the concept of America actually is that all men are created equal. Jefferson truly believed that when he wrote it. He knew very well that he was leaving the word white out of that statement because they wanted to include black men in the statement of all men are created equal. They wanted to include women in that statement. And that's what it meant. It was setting the guide, the principle that we would work towards throughout history to achieve. And Lincoln brought up that statement at the Gettysburg Address because that was the point of the Civil War, was to get us past slavery and closer to that dream. And then Martin Luther King Jr., same thing. And I think we need to keep striving towards that dream where we treat all people as if they are equal in the eyes of the law. And we offer respect to different ideas and opinions regardless of a person's background. This critical race theory is the exact opposite of that. They believe that race is determinative, that if you are white, you're an oppressor. If you're black, you're oppressed. That is not only a terribly offensive and racist thing to say to a white person by applying that terrible derogatory term of racism to them, but it's also a terrible thing to do to black children by implying that somehow that they are less than their white counterparts or that they're always going to be victims that can't achieve anything. It is fundamentally evil, and I hope people see that.
Yeah, I mean, when you try to espouse concepts that babies are born racist, I mean, you're not to be taken seriously, in my opinion.
I couldn't say it better.
Other items on the agenda here that I want to talk with you about, the eviction moratorium expired at the end of July. However, the president has decided to just ignore the Supreme Court and actually reimpose the eviction moratorium based on an opinion by the CDC, and I'm not sure where the CDC got the power to make these kinds of decisions. But there was a series of articles, and you were quoted in one of them by Mark Fitch over at the Yankee Institute, talking about some of the challenges faced by landlords here in the state and across the country, and how this eviction moratorium is actually going to make it worse, not only for the landlords, but for the tenants.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, you know what's so funny is that the president has been quoted, and so is our governor, I believe, with the whole idea that, well, we want to keep people in their homes. Well, there are a lot of ways to keep people in their homes, but telling one side of a contractual obligation that they do not have an obligation to the other person is not the correct way. That's fundamentally wrong and anti-American in every aspect. If the government wants to keep people in their homes, then find a way to give them the ability to pay their rent. That's what needs to happen. It doesn't require that we just ignore the rights of the other party in the transaction. Hey, Steve, you might not know, but I'm in the real estate business. That's my regular job. I help people buy and sell homes, but a large part of my business is investors, and a particular type of investors, which are people that buy multifamily homes. I've helped many investors come and purchase homes in the city of Waterbury, right where you are. Many of them are owner occupied. They live on the first floor and they have tenants on the second or third floor to help with the mortgage. And I've done so many of those transactions over the years. And today what's happening is the people that own these properties, they're losing their residences because they're being foreclosed on because their renters are being told, well, you don't have to pay the landlord. And now the landlord's stuck. He still has a mortgage. He still has taxes to pay. He can't afford to pay the mortgage on his own house where he lives. How can any government official think it's okay to pick and choose who they're going to benefit with their policies like this? It's wrong and it's evil.
Well, and it's also it's disconnected from reality, like so much of our policies that they impose, because this idea that landlords just have this big old pile of money stockpiled somewhere and this isn't going to hurt them is just disingenuous in the extreme. Look, landlords don't want to evict people. Landlords only can make money and pay their bills if they have tenants. But this idea that landlords are just sitting here salivating at the opportunity to throw people out of their apartments is, again, completely disconnected from reality.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the landlords that I know, at least the ones that I work with, are very quality people. They care about making sure that they have a good working relationship with their tenants, because that's how you make money, by making sure you have happy tenants who are delighted to live in your property and pay you rent. It's just shocking to me that this view of a landlord is somehow that they are someone that is oppressive or evil and needs to be reckoned with by government policy, is just a twisted view that has nothing to do with reality. And it's very similar to our previous topic. All of this has a stem back to Marxism, which is this idea that somehow it's a political motivation for people that want to manipulate people and achieve power. That's what Marxism is. It's the ability to take and divide people up into categories, whether it's by race, white people versus black people versus women versus men. And in this case, it's landlords versus tenants. And I have never looked at policy like that. I try and represent all my constituents equally. When a bill comes before me in the legislature, my first question is this proposal going to benefit or adversely impact any individuals that I represent? And if the answer is yes, then the bill is a no vote. It's just that simple. And here we have policy that is not just doing that by accident. It is actually being designed for the purpose of dividing people up and hurting some parts of our population to the benefit of others. There's nothing more evil and wrong than that. And the reason why I keep using that word is because it's anti-American. The foundational principles of our country are to protect the rights of individuals. And the role of the government is to stay out of the way to allow people to thrive and grow, and not to manipulate people down to the last decimal point so that they can achieve their version of reality.
What's really interesting, too, is these policies that they're promoting are coming from the people who are promoting these policies are the very same people that are constantly excoriating big business. And what they're doing with these policies is they're actually helping big business and harming small entrepreneurs who are trying to get a leg up in society, because only big business has got the resources to kind of ride this thing out, and they're going to kind of swing in like coming into the rescue when these people have to sell their properties because they can't pay the bills because of this moratorium.
Right. It's absolutely happening, and you have to ask yourself why. What is happening? Are these big businesses supporting these policies? Are the politicians that are putting these policies forward benefiting from the big businesses surviving? I mean, it's the same thing about the COVID lockdowns. When they, originally instituted a lockdown in the state of Connecticut, and nationally, all this happened. Right here, we had a situation where certain businesses were allowed to stay open. You had the Home Depot was allowed to stay open. The
Walmart,
the Staples, and Walmart, those are staying open. But the small mom and pop shop next door has got to close. Despite the fact that there's no legitimate scientific or health reason for that. They could follow certainly the same exact protocol, but no, we're not going to allow that. That's, again, the government using force in a way that is incorrect by picking winners and losers and benefiting some versus the others. And it's the most shocking aspect of how government has grown in a bad way just in the last decade that I've served in the legislature.
Well, I'm finding it rather humorous now that the governor is kind of treading very lightly when it comes to imposing restrictions and putting up statewide mandates and saying, well, we're going to leave a lot of this up to the mayors of the towns and the cities to make their own decisions. And I'm thinking, wow, boy, this is a complete 180 from where he was last year, where he was just reveling in all of this power that he had. I'm also finding it interesting when he talks about this and he goes, well, I really want to bring the legislature in on this. Well, then why do you insist on extending your executive authority or your emergency powers if you want to have the input from the legislature? That's the way it's supposed to work, but it's a radical change from where he was just 6 months ago.
Right. Well, I have a lot to say about those. Just a few sentences. The first thing I want to say is that to me, it's extremely encouraging. I think it's encouraging because I think the message that the governor is receiving is that it's not going to be so easy this time to lock down the state or to put in a mask mandate, because I think a lot of people are extremely skeptical of what they're hearing about the science, about the day-to-day, aspects of what's happening with the COVID-19 virus, whether masks are effective, whether parents are actually going to put up with masks on their children in schools, whether the teachers' unions are going to cooperate, whether minority communities are going to cooperate. He's getting pushback from lots and lots of different angles, and I think he's realized that it's a dangerous political move to go back down the same road again. And I think that's encouraging, because I want to see things happen on a local level. And I want to get us back to the America that existed pre-COVID. I keep saying this to people. When COVID first happened, you might remember President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence coming to the podium and begging the American people for 2 weeks of cooperation to flatten the curve. There was no threat of a lockdown. There was no government force. There was no, we are going to mandate this or that. There was no COVID passport talk. There was none of that. It was, we are coming to the free citizens of America asking for help to stop the spread of this virus for a singular purpose, too, which was to prevent the overwhelming of the hospitals. No desire to stop the virus at all or prevent deaths or any of that. It was really asking free people to cooperate to slow the spread. That was all it was. Look where we have come in a year and a half, where now the American people are largely waiting for their state and federal governments to tell them the next rule they have to follow. It is very disheartening to me. I want to restore the notion that people are free, the government works for us, and that all of these things, whether it is masks or keeping your business open or frequenting a business or getting a vaccine, are individual choices for us as free people to make.
Well, one last topic I want to touch on with you briefly, and that is this issue out of Bridgeport where the city councilman has now been indicted on federal charges of voter fraud. And I talked about this earlier in the hour. Why is this happening at the federal level and not at the state level?
Well, that's impossible, Steve. There is no voter fraud in Connecticut. Thank you for laughing, because anyone who knows me and where I stand on this knows I was being completely tongue-in-cheek. Because I've been told over and over again for the last decade, when I bring up concerns about voter integrity in Connecticut, I'm being told, there is no voter fraud. There is no such thing. You're making it up, Sampson. It's insane. Despite the fact that the documentation is out there. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of people that have been criminally charged, fined, and so on in the state of Connecticut for committing voter fraud. And, I bring them up every time there's a debate in the legislature. We get up there and we talk for hours and hours, and I go through this. In fact, there is an article, which I will point people to if they want to go find it online, in the Waterbury Republican American. It is from October 20th, 2019. It's a fabulous article. Maybe it was 2020, but it's that date, October 20th. And you can look it up. They listed dozens and dozens of cases of voter fraud that were prosecuted in the state of Connecticut. The idea that it's not happening here is ridiculous. And I'm very fearful that COVID was used in the last election to encourage a set of rules and a system that is just ripe for abuse. And that same system is going to be used in this municipal election with even less reason for it. And that is this unsolicited mailing of absentee ballot applications. That is just asking for trouble, because even acknowledged by Martin Looney, the president of the Senate and the leader of the Democrat Party in the state of Connecticut, this guy got up on the floor of the Senate and said during a debate on the subject of early voting that absentee ballots are problematic because you just never know who's filling out that absentee ballot application. What more true words? Of course, he would backtrack on that today, but that's just proof that the Democrats do acknowledge that it's a problem. But it's been benefiting them, and as a result, they're certainly never going to address it.
Well, of course, and that's what I say all the time. Why would the people who win actually want to investigate whether or not they won legitimately? Well, Senator Sampson, I wish we had a lot more time to have you on because I know we could dig into this topic much deeper and get into some of the details on it. But we'll have you back and we'll talk about that again at another time. But I do want to thank you for your time here today and thank you for your continued efforts and keeping the lights focused and the spotlights focused on these issues. So thank you, sir, for your time and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much, Steve. I can't wait for the opportunity and keep doing what you're doing. I appreciate the fact that you get these facts in front of our residents on a day-to-day basis. You're doing a great job. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, sir, for those words. Have a great day. Sir, for those words. Have a great day. Sir, for those words. Have